helpful.
Yeah, because my friend said, can I take some notes?
Yeah,
If I can just send her your...
that's perfect.
Yeah.
I've also got, we can talk about this more later, but I've also got this with me, and this is the book that I wrote that incorporates a lot of the information that we're going through today and a lot more.
Yeah.
You're going
Which
through at the moment.
Yes, yeah, I'm going through it. It's really helpful.
So it's got
And it's very
everything.
user friendly, isn't it? It's
Thank you.
very easy read, but interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, there's going to be a bunch that you can, yeah.
And it's actually written like child-like,
That
isn't
was-
it?
yeah.
So it gives you the interest rather than just having lots of prose. Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I tried to, well, I think what I tried to do in all of my sessions is just give you the information in a non-judgmental way that's also easy for you to then apply. Because I think what I personally dislike is when you find information online that A, assumes that everybody can immediately pick it up, and B, you know, isn't as simple as maybe you'd like it to be. So that's what I'm intending to do with today's session. So have any of you been to the nutrition session before?
Yeah.
No, okay, cool. So this will be a good repeat for some of you and some new information. So general nutrition. So today we're going to cover every food group, and we're going to go into the ones that you know, foods that you might want to have a little bit more of, ones that you might want to have a little bit less of, how to add some balance into your diet. But when I say healthy diet, what comes to mind for you?
Salad.
Salad? What was yours? Fruit? Yeah, what else?
Yeah, vegetables.
Fruit and veg?
Yeah.
Proteins?
No McDonald's.
No McDonald's? No, what else? What else comes to mind?
Cooking fresh things.
Cooking fresh. That's what they got, and that was something we talked about a lot in the last session. If you were here for that, you know, we've come to a point where a lot of the food that we eat isn't cooked fresh, and a lot of the food that we eat isn't, you know, naturally sourced and grown, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we'll talk about this more. To me, the words that I like to think of are understanding and balance. Understanding, because if you have an understanding of the foods that are in front of you, you'll probably think twice naturally about eating too much or too little, right? So if I told you this food is going to do you really good and this food's probably not, you're going to look at them differently, as opposed to if you don't know what the functions are, right? So just understanding these different foods. Like, how many of you look at a plate of food and can honestly say that you know what everything is for or what it does?
I think most of us do.
Or at least a good idea, I imagine.
Yeah.
I think that question gets different answers.
Yeah.
Some people feel very confident about looking at a plate and, you know, kind of understanding what they all are for.
Yeah.
Other people less so. So hopefully today will give you some extra insights. The other word I like to use is balance, because I, for one, do not believe that you should have to eliminate foods from your diet, nor do I believe that we should be demonizing foods. So do you ever go online, or maybe you talk to somebody like a GP, and immediately you get a list of things that you shouldn't do. Don't eat this, don't eat that, take that off the menu. Yeah, and the problem with starting to remove all of these foods is that you don't get the nuance, right? You don't get the nuance of the foods themselves. So actually, a lot of these foods could be beneficial in some ways. If we have less of them or we eat them differently, they could be benefiting us. And also, how many of you like food?
Yeah.
How many of you get enjoyment from eating food?
Yes.
Right? So if we eliminate food from our diet, that's not really going to help. It's no fun. It's no fun. Plus, also, you know, you guys come here, and we're gonna talk about this in a little bit more detail soon. But you come here, you get given a cake, you have your tea and coffee with everybody, and you talk and you mingle, and like the food is not just something that we eat for energy, and it's actually a cultural thing, right? We get enjoyment from it, and we talk over it, and right? So in my mind, there are no bad foods, only bad relationships with food. So, you know, if you find yourself continuously snacking on that food and you're putting on weight, and, you know, maybe you've maybe you've slipped over into becoming diabetic, for example. That's not the fault of the food itself, but maybe how I'm approaching my relationship with it. Maybe I'm simply overindulging a little bit. Maybe I need to change the pattern with which I eat that particular food. But you get the idea, right? There are so many things we can do. So with that in mind, we're going to go first through carbohydrates and then work our way through it. So here are a few examples of carbohydrates. They are any starchy and sugary food. So any food that contains sugar and or starch is considered a carbohydrate. So a lot of the time there are foods that you may not necessarily consider a carbohydrate, but there are one. So obviously you got your classics, rice, pasta, potatoes, sweet potato, bulgur wheat, stuff like that. But then you've also got vegetables that contain sugar and starch. You've got fruits that contain sugar and starch. You've also, what other things can you think?
Go on then.
Surprise us.
Surprise us. Pretty much all the above, all the grains, the cereals, anything made with flour, these are all carbohydrates. So this is the body's main fast access energy source. We also get energy from fats, but this is the main one that our body goes to when we actually need energy, right? But not all carbohydrates are made equal, and so this is a really important factor that we have to consider. So certain carbohydrates affect blood sugar more and others less. So blood sugar alone is such an intricate topic, and it relates to people who have low energy levels, it relates to people who have diabetes or pre-diabetes, it also relates to people who have cancer. And we'll talk about why that is. So firstly, blood sugar is a really interesting topic because every single one of us has sugar inside of our blood, or when it's inside of the blood, it's known as glucose. That essentially is like having petrol in your fuel tank in your car. Like that's kind of like our reserve energy. We use that day to day. It goes up, it goes down, but realistically, we want that level to be stable. So do any of you know what some of the problems are of having high blood sugar?
Well, it's diabetes.
Diabetes is the big one. And with that, when your blood sugar is particularly high, the risk is that it starts to damage different aspects of your body. So it damages nerves and it damages cells. And your entire body is made up of nerves and cells. And for that reason, if your blood sugar is particularly high, this is the reason why people with diabetes end up having eye problems, kidney problems, circulation problems, amputations, you name it, because these are all areas of the body that are made up of nerves and cells, right? So that's one aspect. Another aspect is that it affects your energy levels. So if your blood sugar is higher, you're going to have a little bit more energy, lower, a little bit less energy, you might feel lethargic. But realistically, what we want to do is we want to stabilize ourselves. And if we can get ourselves stable, then you're going to have more energy throughout the day. How many of you feel like that's something you could probably benefit from? So we'll talk about a few things you can do to improve that. Before we do though, some of you have probably heard me talk about this before. Do you know what the link is between sugar and cancer? Anybody have a guess?
To do with the cells, is it? The
Yeah.
Pizza cells.
Absolutely. So cancer cells are just another form of cell. Obviously, it's not as simple as that, but they are a form of cell, which means they need energy to survive. The form of energy that they consume in order to survive is glucose. So you've got glucose inside of your blood. That's the glucose that cancer cells are going to feed off of and continue to survive. But what happens is a lot of the time you will hear people say people with cancer should not eat sugar. Have you heard that before? Yeah? No? Some people have heard it, some people haven't. I'm not saying that that is the case, because actually it's important to understand that blood sugar is a nuanced topic. It's not as simple as don't eat sugar, because there are certain other aspects of your life that affect your blood sugar. Can anybody think of any other areas of your life that affect your blood sugar?
I think when you do strenuous exercise.
Yes, that's a good point. So when you're doing strenuous exercise, your blood sugar increases to meet the demands of what you're actually doing. So that's part of it. What else?
Stress.
Stress, yeah. Stress is a big one.
Yeah.
So when your stress levels rise, your blood sugar naturally rises as well. So, you know, you could cut sugar out, but you're incredibly stressed. So therefore, cutting sugar out didn't really, you know, meet the objective. Whereas if I maybe cut back on sugar a little bit, but also worked on my stress levels, that's a much more holistic approach. Do you see what I mean? So it's a bit reductive for me to say, don't eat sugar, because actually that's not the only thing that affects your risk of blood sugar going up. So with that in mind, what we want to do, everybody in this room, for a number of different reasons, like if you want to improve your energy levels, if you do want to make sure that cancer cells have less to feed on, if you do want to reduce your risk of diabetes, controlling your blood sugar is paramount. So this here is a little graph to demonstrate A, how your blood sugar can affect your energy levels, and B, how we can use something called glycemic index in our favor. Has anybody heard that phrase before? Yeah, or GI? What would you say that refers to? Forgot it was up there. GI tells you how much a carbohydrate will affect your blood sugar and energy levels, right? So we've got two different types. Well, it's a scale, right? But I like to think of it as higher and lower, because we can, you know, if you're picking two items, you can pick a higher and you can pick a lower one. So let's go with the higher one. For an example, I wake up in the morning and the first thing that I eat is a higher GI food. Higher GI foods typically cause your blood sugar to rise higher and quicker. I get a bunch of energy, and then about half an hour later or 20 minutes later, whatever it may be, what happens? I get a dip, right? And not only just a dip, like I get a dramatic fall off. So now my energy levels have dropped, and really they haven't actually recovered. If anything, they've continued to get worse as time's gone on. Whereas if I have more of the lower GI foods, suddenly I get a little bit more out of my gas tank. I think about it as the difference between like petrol and diesel. We get a bit more mileage out of it. That's kind of what we're aiming for in making these changes. So which of these seems more sustainable to you? The green one, right? Ideally, what we want to do is we want to figure out ways of keeping that stable more frequently, and therefore you will feel better. Like for me, when I started doing these sessions, I found myself putting into practice more of what I was teaching naturally. And I found myself feeling so much better. My energy levels just extended. I didn't find myself getting brain fog and you know, experiencing big slumps. Suddenly, I just felt stable. And I think if that's something that we all work towards, you will just feel so much better, right? So what we can do is, you know, you can keep track, and then in the future, you can let me know how you found it. And then we can make some further adjustments, but it does make a very big difference. So here are some examples. Here is a list of lower GI foods. So these are foods that, on average, in comparison to the other foods that I've got, are going to affect your blood sugar less. There's still a scale here, so some of these foods are going to affect blood sugar more than others, but on average, we call this the lower GI list, right? So if I go through the fruits, we've got things like berries, pomegranates. Grapes is a bit arguable. Some people say they're higher, some people say lower. Really, they're more towards the low-medium end. We've got citrus fruits, apples, pears, cherries, kiwi, apricot, prunes, and also less ripe banana. If we have all of these and they are unsweetened, they are generally going to affect our blood sugar less than some of the alternatives. But of course, quantity makes a big difference. A handful of grapes as opposed to a punnet of grapes does make a difference, right? We've got our vegetables, grains, and legumes. So most of your non-starchy vegetables sit on this list. You know, on the other one, we've got things like parsnips. Whereas on this one, we've got more of your peppers, lettuce, cucumbers, stuff like that. Boiled sweet potato, the way that you cook it makes a difference. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail. New potato, more skin, and the skin has fibre. And we'll talk about that in more detail as well, but they do affect blood sugar less. Beans, chickpeas, lentils, peas, soy, quinoa, bulgur wheat, nuts, seeds, all that good stuff. In fact, most of these don't affect blood sugar very much at all. So especially your nuts and your seeds, your lentils, your peas, very low. And actually there's some interesting things you can do with those foods that can actually make everything much better, so we'll come back to that. Dairy products, most of your dairy products, provided that they are actual dairy products, like cow's milk dairy products, don't affect blood sugar very much at all, provided that they are unsweetened. There are also some dairy alternatives, such as almond milk, soy milk, and coconut milk, that are also lower. But there are others, like oat milk, for example, that do affect blood sugar more. Starchy foods, you'll know these ones, right? They're all your browns, they're all your seeded, they're all your wholemeals. So brown, wild, and basmati rice, seeded wholemeal bread, sourdough bread, rye bread, wholemeal pasta, and whole grain oats. Those ones, what's something that you notice about a lot of these foods? Is there any commonality that you see?
Colour.
Color, yeah, darker, generally a lot of the time. Another one is that they're packed with nutrients. So these foods, in comparison to the ones we're going to look at next, I'll show you the difference. These ones have a lot of fat, a lot of fiber, and a lot of protein. And there's a reason why, because those nutrients help to slow down your digestion. So instead of you eating that food and it going and digesting very quickly, it goes down and it digests very slowly, and therefore it enters your bloodstream slowly as well.
Is it also that they're less processed, where you've got the starchy foods?
That's part of it. And not just the starchy foods, but also up here, you know, we've got foods that are less processed, therefore they have more nutrients inside of them, hence why they're darker, generally, yeah. Syrups, pure maple syrup. So if you wanted something to sweeten with, maybe I wouldn't get like a high fructose kind of syrup, but maybe a pure maple syrup, like a nice quality one. That could be a better option. And then down here, unfortunately, there are no sugars which are considered lower GI. I even fell into the trap of thinking that coconut sugar and, what was the other? Agave? No, whatever, were lower GI. But actually most sugars, because they're so processed, because they digest quite quickly, most of them do affect blood sugar a decent amount. But like it says here, smaller portions will affect blood sugar less. So even just a slight reduction. You know, I know people who go from having 3 teaspoons of sugar in the morning in their tea to having 2 or 1 or 1.5, and that reduction makes a very big difference.
What about where you've got syrups?
Yeah.
That obviously doesn't include honey, because I'm really on the fence. I don't know where honey fits in really.
Honey's a tricky one. If I'm honest with you, again, I've had to do a bit more research myself into honey, because firstly, well, I'll show you here. So honey sits on this side.
Yeah.
I will say myself that less refined honeys are generally going to be better, right? They've got more of the benefits that you get. You know, they've got antibacterial properties, anti-inflammatory properties. But the more processed it is, the less of that benefit you get. However, generally speaking, it's the same kind of thing. Honey's not a bad thing, but maybe a smaller quantity will be
Even
best.
local, when you know they say to you, if you buy local honey,
Yeah.
it's the best.
Local honey's great.
And that's how.
And this is more anecdotal, but a lot of people find that when they have local honey, they don't get hay fever, or the hay fever improves, because you're having honey pollinated by local bees, and when you ingest it, it gives your immune system a chance to become like almost acclimatized to the pollen. But again, that's more anecdotal. That's less of, that's more
Not
yeah.
spoonfuls of it, but just
Yeah, little bits at a time. Little bits at a time. Okay, so this side we've got higher GI foods. So you can see that there's a bit of a difference between these and the ones on the other page. So we've got fruits like pineapple, melon, riper banana. We've also then got more processed.
Riper banana, you class it when they go brown or
When they go
black.
squishy.
soft.
Yes,
They go
green.
spotty.
The green ones are going to affect blood sugar less. The yellow and especially the brown are going to affect blood sugar more. Not to say that you can't eat a nice yellow banana,
Yeah, exactly.
I prefer it, yeah.
Not very
but
nice.
some people actually do like the greener bananas, and so for those people, that's a benefit that they're getting, you know. And then here we've also got some of the more processed forms of fruit that you can get. So canned fruits in syrups and juice. Cooked fruit because it's now softer, easily digestible. And sweetened is the key word there, dried fruit. So dried fruit's not a bad thing, but a lot of the time it will have sugar added to it. Or if it doesn't have sugar added to it, it could have like juice added to it. So that's something to think about. Here we've got, again, so we've got the white potatoes, baked and roasted sweet potato. So on the last one we had boiled, this one we have the roasted. Parsnips, pumpkin, and vegetables, grains, and legumes which have been cooked and or highly processed. So for example, if we're talking about levels of processing, on this side we've got corn on the cob, sweet corn out of a can, cornflakes. The further we go in that processing, in this case, the more that food is going to affect your blood sugar. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's something we can think about as well. So levels of processing is really interesting. We'll actually talk about that more in the next session when we do the applied nutrition. That one will be really good. Dairy products with added sugar. We've also got rice milk and oat milk. So on the last page we had the soy and the coconut milk and the almond milk. On this one we've got the rice milk and the oat milk. So if you had these, do any of you have like oat milk, for example? No? Do you have regular milk?
I've had oat milk.
You do, or you've just had it?
I bought it.
I got you.
Because I couldn't get my soya. I always use soya.
Oh, I see.
And I used it instead. But I did realise it wasn't a good thing to buy.
Why? What makes you say that?
I just thought I was a bit dubious about it because of oats and that.
Yeah. Well, that's the same kind of thing as before. So if I get whole grain oats, which we saw on the lower end, that's got the fibre and some protein and some fat in it and so on. Digests slowly, releases slowly, loads of energy. If I get the instant oats, which have been processed and stripped away of not all, but a lot of that goodness, that will affect my blood sugar more. Then oat milk, so heavily processed, now in liquid form, will affect my blood sugar a lot more, ultimately. Starchy foods, we've got all of our white foods. White pasta, white bread, white rice, highly processed cereals. So again, there are levels to this. Fruit and fibre might be better than cornflakes, but the whole grain oats are probably going to be better than both in that respect. We've got microwave rice. Again, processed to a degree, easier. It's easy, right? And it's nice. I'm not saying don't have it. There are still things that you can do to adjust if you're having the microwave rice, but you get the idea. I've got to put it on the list. And then instant oats, like we said before. Down here, we've got our syrups. So if you're looking at a food label, a lot of the time it will say a form of sugar that you may not consider sugar, but a lot of the time it is. So glucose syrup, you get that. I think glucose syrup is one of the first ingredients, if I'm not mistaken, on a Lucozade label. High fructose corn syrup, just highly concentrated corn syrup, right? So just starch on starch, pack into a thick liquid syrup. Brown rice syrup, another one that you might see on a label. If you see brown rice syrup, you might think decent, but it's a higher GI food. Molasses and then honey. Again, there's some nuance there, but it's good for you to know. And then lastly down here we've got sugars: white sugar, brown sugar, cane sugar, caster sugar, demerara, jaggery, a form of South Asian sugar, date sugar, that was the other one, and coconut sugar. So, again, it's good to be aware that there are differences here. Some of them do affect blood sugar, maybe slightly less, but overall, a smaller quantity is going to do us good. So is that useful? Does that give you a few things that you can take away with you? Immediately, I imagine there are a few switches you can see yourself making.
With the fruits, I'm quite surprised with the pineapple and melon. In particular, I know melon can taste really sweet, but pineapple isn't particularly sweet, and I always thought pineapple was a good go-to.
Well, don't get me wrong, it is. And I'm a big advocate for fruit generally. Like, you'll hear a lot of people, especially in the diabetes space, saying don't eat fruit. but fruit gives us vitamins and minerals and fibre, and it tastes good, and it's probably going to be better than like sweets and chocolate and stuff like that in most cases. So it's still a good option, but again, quantity. You know, I'll eat a few slices rather than a whole melon. Yeah. So are we happy with this?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, it's good for you to know that there are factors that you can change that will adjust the glycemic index, but that means that you can keep certain foods that you like. Because you might have looked at that list and said, oh, I can switch that and this. But if there are other changes that you don't want to make, you don't have to. Like, I don't really like brown rice, so I'm going to eat my white rice. But there are things that you can change still. So, for example, one of those things is adding variety. So, like I said before, the reason why a lot of those foods affect blood sugar less is because they contain more of those 3 nutrients that I said. Do you remember which ones they were? Fat, fiber, and protein. So those 3 nutrients digest slower than carbohydrates. So for that reason, if we were to add more variety to the plate, that meal will now affect my blood sugar less. So if I've got a bowl of rice and I just eat that bowl of rice, it will affect my blood sugar this much. If, however, I were to add some broccoli and chicken and something, suddenly that meal will affect my blood sugar less. Because all of that will mix in together when it's in my stomach, slow down that digestion, voila. That one's an easy one. You're making lunch, a bit of extra lettuce. Maybe that won't make a massive difference, but it will make a difference, and it's all about reducing the average, right? Timing. What do you think I'm going to say for that one?
Eat when you're hungry or not? Or
I
eat
mean,
in between?
to be fair, that is
Time
part
it.
of it. It's more about the order. So the order with which I eat the food, right? So there's two different ways you can use that information. A, if you are making a meal, and you're eating your meal, and you were to start with the fat, fiber, and protein. So I started with the vegetables, then I moved to the chicken, then I moved to the rice. Now the rice will affect my blood sugar even less because I've padded my stomach with the food that is going to digest slower. Does that make sense? So that, again, easy change you can make. Eat the vegetables first, like you would tell your children or something, right? The other thing that you can do with that is you can think about it in a slightly different context of eating like before your meal. So let's say you go into your kitchen and it's like 5 p.m. and you have that piece of cake staring at you from the fridge. If you eat it now on an empty stomach, it will affect your blood sugar more and probably ruin your appetite, but it will affect your blood sugar more than if you were to wait and have it for dessert.
If you can wait.
If you can wait. So if you can wait, it means that you can quite literally have your cake and preparation is the last one. So there are a few things that you can do to improve the glycemic index, but just through how you are actually making the food. So for example, did you know that if you are making rice, pasta, or potatoes, you cook it and then you let it cool down, it will now affect your blood sugar less.
Yeah, that's a surprise, isn't it?
Yeah. So you cook it regularly, you know, let's say you're making spag roll. You make your pasta a little bit earlier, you cook it, you could leave it on the stove, you can let it cool down, you could even rinse it to help it cool down quicker. But now because you've let it cool down, the starch within the carbohydrates have converted into what's called resistant starch, which actually doesn't digest in the same way. In fact, a lot of it doesn't digest at all. It acts more like fiber. So instead of it digesting and becoming glucose and going out into your bloodstream, it now doesn't. And as a result, you can have your white pasta and feel better about the fact that it will now be affecting your blood sugar less, even if you heat it back up. So you could heat it back up after you've allowed it to cool down, and it will still affect your blood sugar less.
Someone said to me, when cooking pasta, once you've done it, it's cooked, rinse it under a cold tap. So
Yeah,
that maybe why
that helps do it. And also you can probably get rid of some of the excess starch that's on top of it. But mainly, yeah, if you cool it down, it changes the whole composition. That's the reason why you ever have, I don't know, like a roast, and then you've got potatoes left over the next day, but you notice that the color and the texture is different.
Yeah.
That's the reason why.
Right.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So that's an easy switch that you can make to enable you to eat those foods that you like, but in a healthier way. Plus, an extra bonus of that last one is that if you do allow it to cool down, not only will it affect your blood sugar less, but it will contain fewer calories. So overall, a win-win,
Win-win, yeah.
right? So let's say, let's go back to that spag bowl example. I decide I'm going to make a spag bowl, I'm going to add some extra variety to it. I'm going to add a few extra types of vegetables in there, maybe an extra little bit of meat, but I've added to it rather than taken away. Timing. Instead of eating that cake while I'm cooking it like I might ordinarily, I'm going to wait, that's going to be my dessert. And in terms of preparation, I'm going to make the pasta a little bit earlier, so that way it can cool down, and when I do eat, I can heat it back up. And now you've incorporated all three, but you're actually having the exact same meal that you were having before. But you're affecting your blood sugar less. What do you think of that?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
That's really interesting.
Good. So those are some examples. Again, I don't like to tell you to take things away unless you need to take things away. But if you can add and you can adjust, then you can actually change your diet without really having to change your diet all that much, which I think is pretty cool. Cool. So that's carbohydrates. We happy with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, let's keep going. Protein. Now, in my experience, most people do not eat enough protein. Would you, and I don't mean this in a patronizing way, but would you even know how much protein is enough protein?
No.
I also find it difficult to look at some and know how much it is.
Yeah, and that makes sense. That makes sense.
I can't tell if it's 5 grams or 50 grams.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so let me give you some guidelines that you can follow. Generally speaking, a few portions of protein per day will do you good, but they can't just be like one egg is only about 5, maybe 8 grams of protein. An average person requires around, let's say around 1 gram per kilo that they weigh. 1 gram per kilo that they weigh. Now that does differ for some people. So for example, I do a lot of training. I am very active. I need more protein for my recovery. So my number is more like 1.5 grams to 2. So I'm eating quite a substantial amount of protein every day, but it's within the range that is healthy, right? For you, we got to try and figure out how much that actually is. So for example, if you had 1 egg in the morning, that's only about 5, maybe 8 grams of protein. We're gonna have to eat a lot more throughout the rest of the day in order to catch up, right? So I need to sneeze. It's not coming out. It'll come out. A glass of, like a 500 ml glass of milk is around 15 grams of protein, so that's a decent chunk. A chicken breast, like a decent sized chicken breast, is between 20 and 30 grams of protein, so that could actually make up a substantial amount, but that's also that's a good chunk of food, right? What else? Fish. A salmon fillet, like a regular kind of thin salmon fillet, that's going to give us probably between 15 and 25 grams, depending on the size of it. So some of you might actually be eating enough protein, but if you aren't, you might be experiencing more fatigue, you might be experiencing slow recovery. And this is particularly important for people in this room, because if you are, how many of you are undergoing treatment at the moment? Or maybe you're on medication, or maybe you're just extremely fatigued and tired. Your body requires the protein in order to rebuild, right? So it's important for repairing your brain and your body. Every single day, we are inflicting damage on all of this. Even if it doesn't feel like you've done all that much, you need the protein there to rebuild. That's your restoration. So eating it frequently throughout the day, eating a large enough quantity throughout the day. Eating a variety of proteins is important because different proteins give us different benefits, we'll talk about that more in a bit more detail. Avoiding processed meats and processed proteins generally. So it's not just meats, but you know, vegetarian alternative meats, you know, the fake kind. A lot of the time have the same problem, which is that they are often pumped full of ingredients that maybe we want to be careful of. So especially when you're looking at processed meats like ham, look at the ingredients, look at how many ingredients you wouldn't have in your kitchen, for example.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're going to talk about that more in the next session, but for now it's a good thing, it's a good practice to start turning those labels over. And then lastly, having oily fish 2 to 3 times per week. Do any of you feel like you meet that at the moment? Yeah? No? Yeah? Okay. Yeah? Yeah. So 2 to 3 times per week might be a bit much for some. For others, you might be hitting that easily. Oily fish is a great form of protein, but the reason why we want it more frequently is because that gives us the healthy fat, which we're going to look at next. So if you don't have, like, are any of you vegan or vegetarian?
Yes.
Yeah. So in which case, having things like chia seeds, flax seeds, and walnuts is a good alternative to having the oily fish. Do you have a lot of that?
Yes, but they upset your stomach.
Yeah, that's the problem. You kind of have to.
Very hard to digest.
You have to grow your tolerance quite slowly.
Do it slowly.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Do you soak them in water?
No.
So that's something you could try. If you take a little glass of flax seeds, put a little bit of water, or maybe like yogurt.
Yeah.
Leave it overnight in the fridge. The next morning, drink it or scoop it, and it will be so much easier for you to digest because it's already pretty much in like a liquid form.
Right.
I would try that if I were you.
Good tip. Yeah, thank you.
What about things like lentils and beans and things?
So beans, peas, lentils, all forms of protein, but there is a slight distinction between different types. So we have complete proteins and we have incomplete proteins. So the distinction is that complete proteins have all of the 9 essential amino acids that your body requires but cannot produce itself. If I eat therefore, you know, my chicken and my fish and my pork, maybe and soy products and stuff like that, eggs, dairy products, these have all of those amino acids that I need. I still want to add a bit more variety in there, but I'm getting what I need. If you are vegan or vegetarian especially, and let's say most of your protein comes from beans and lentils, well, you may not be getting everything that the body needs. So it's good to then mix it up and add some more things. A couple things you should know though. Soy products can be a little bit tricky for some people because they can affect hormone levels, particularly estrogen levels. So for example, my mum had breast cancer, she now can't have soy products. Right? So that's something to be aware of when you're making these decisions. But if you are mainly relying on those proteins, maybe having some quinoa, the chia seeds, some buckwheat, those could be good examples to draw from. Yeah, does that make sense? Are we happy with that? Now, I want you to think about this. Do you think you consume enough protein? Most of us consume a substantial amount of carbohydrates because they're easy to consume, they're very tasty, they give us energy. They're also there, like the bread is there made, it's easy to pick up and eat, whereas you don't always have, I don't know, a chicken breast on hand or whatever. But to me, protein should be one of your priorities. Protein should absolutely be one of your priorities. Firstly, like we looked at before, we add more protein to the meal, we're going to digest it slower, our energy levels are going to be better, our blood sugar is going to be better, our body restoration is going to be better. So those are all reasons to include more of it. But also, for the most part, it will just help us to keep our body in good health. That's what we want, right? So the carbs, their main function is going to be to give us energy. The protein, their main function is going to be to help us restore the body. That to me is paramount, especially if your body is already feeling tattered, fatigued, whatever you want to say, this will help. You know? Any questions on protein? Are we happy with this?
And the soya, I buy it dried. It's just dried soya. Nothing else mixed with it, only what I put to it.
Okay.
You know. So is that okay?
I mean, yeah, so don't get me wrong, soy products, for a lot of people get on very well with soy products. It's just that some people don't. And if I'm honest with you, depending on you know, any medications you're on or any form of treatments that you're going through, I would maybe ask your GP what they think of soy.
Yeah, of course I'm not on any medication or treatment. I use soya, so
Got
that's
you.
okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'd still maybe throw it in next time you have a chat with the GP, just to be safe.
Yeah, okay. Well, I've been eating it for years.
Oh yeah?
Yes.
In which case, I think you'll be
Yeah.
okay. You've done all right. Okay, let's move on to cholesterol and fat. So if I say cholesterol, do you think good or bad?
Well, there's good and bad cholesterol.
Oh,
Nice.
yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Fat, if I say fat, do you think good or bad?
Okay.
Bit of both. So cholesterol and fat are both useful tools in the body that are involved in the following: hormone production, cell function, digestion, and the immune system. So these are like incredibly powerful tools that we have inside of our body, and we need it inside of the body. The difference between the two is that cholesterol is not a fuel source, whereas fat is. So fat will get burnt up, it will get used, it will get deposited on top of the body, you know, under the skin. Cholesterol, however, can only be transported, and the way that it is transported around the body is through lipoproteins. Have you heard that phrase before, that word? So you might have heard of these before, HDLs and LDLs.
Yeah.
So if you go to the GP, they're going to test your cholesterol and they will give you the ratio of your HDLs and LDLs. I'll tell you the difference. So lipoproteins are bundles of cholesterol, fat, and protein. Now, I think of it like a cargo ship. That's kind of how my brain works. So I think of it like a cargo ship because the lipoproteins are what transports the cholesterol around the body and drops it off where it needs to go. There are high density lipoproteins and low density. There is a greater spectrum of lipoproteins. However, these are the main two that especially your GP will be focused on when you go get tested. So the reason why HDLs are good and LDLs are bad is because when HDLs travel through your blood, they actually help to clean the plaque out of your blood vessels, right? And then what happens is it takes the cholesterol to where it needs to go, it gets recycled, we're good to go. LDLs, however, what they do is they cause inflammation within the blood vessels. And the inflammation causes the swelling and it causes plaque to develop in the blood vessels. So you know when we talk about blood vessels getting blocked up, and that can potentially lead to things like heart disease, heart attacks, strokes, so on. That's what we're talking about. So these help to scrub away that plaque, and these actually add to the plaque. So in order to adjust our levels, we need to adjust the types of fat that we are eating in order to get the right ratio, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Also, does that help to clear up what cholesterol and fat actually is inside the body? A lot of the time, it becomes like a big scary thing, but actually in most cases, we do need all of the above. We just need it in the right quantities. We need it in the right ratios. So this here is then a list of foods that maybe we want to eat more of, we want to be cautious of, and maybe a little bit less of. So on the left there, your left, we've got monounsaturated and polyunsaturated foods. So we've got a lot of oils, we've got a lot of nuts and a lot of seeds. We've also got oily fish, soybeans as well, and edamame. So these are all foods that maybe we want to start including a little bit more of. Another benefit, the fat will help us to reduce our blood sugar and again, improve our energy levels. It's also a good stable form of energy. So if let's say you're having, I know some people, they switch out butter on their toast for some avocado. Or maybe they start having peanut butter with celery. I know a lot of people who do that. I haven't tried that myself, but people do it.
Sounds a variety.
There's things you can do. And then including things like the hazelnuts and pistachios. You know, I could swap out some of my crisps for some nuts, and that could be a good form of protein and fiber and healthy fat. There are some foods that you want to be aware of with how you cook them, but we'll come on to that in the next slide. I've got some advice for you. We've then got our saturated fats. So we've got all of our dairy products that we spoke about before. We've got fatty meats, processed meats, lard, palm oil, palm kernel oil, coconut oil, and ghee. So the way you can tell that they're saturated fats is if they are more solid at room temperature. So butter, for example, you take it out of the fridge, it remains in that solid kind of state, whereas olive oil, is in a liquid state. So that's generally how you can tell. Same as, you know, the fat that you get on the meat is solid until you cook it, right? These ones are tricky because actually saturated fats are not, you know, the devil. We just want to be careful not to have too much of them. So if I am cooking with butter very frequently and eating a lot of bacon and, you know, a lot of cheese, well then cutting back, not eliminating, but cutting back a little bit can definitely do me good in that respect. And then the ones that we definitely want to be aware of how much we're having are the trans fats. So the trans fats, actually let me rewind for a sec. So these ones help to increase our HDL level and decrease our LDL level. The saturated fats prevent your body from getting rid of the LDLs. So that's one of the reasons why we don't want to have too much. The trans fats, not only do they add to the LDL level, they also reduce the HDL level. So these overall are the worst type of fats that we could be consuming. So we especially find them in vegetable oils that are heated to high temperatures repeatedly. So if you go to a restaurant and they use a deep fat fryer and they haven't changed the oil for a while, we are just accumulating these trans fats. We also find them in things like pastries, biscuits, and cakes, especially the more processed ones. And then lastly, this isn't as much of a problem, but we also find them in very small quantities in meat and dairy products. But there is a difference between the naturally occurring ones and the ones that we get like industrially produced. Does that make sense? So again, does this give you a few things that you can adjust? A little bit more of this, a little bit less of that, will be good. This will help us to improve our cholesterol, again, your energy levels, your blood sugar, all of that good stuff combined. But a lot of these foods we've already looked at, so you're just getting more of a benefit. Okay? Any questions about what we see here?
Can I just go back to when you were talking about the fish?
Yeah.
So where would you put something like sardines that are tinned, might be in tomato, might be in oil? Where do they sit?
So the question I always ask is, how far has that food strayed from its original form? Right, so in the case of sardines, a lot of the time they put the whole fillet in.
Yeah.
And if they do add something to it, they don't add a lot to it. Like they might add oil or brine, or they might add some tomato sauce or something like that. But when you look at the ingredients, it's relatively simple. If, however, I bought fish, chicken, like, what am I trying to think of? Like a fish fillet, but that's been blended up with loads of additional ingredients that aren't necessarily needed, that's suddenly a lot more processed. So I'd say in that case, you're actually pretty good. Like I like those myself.
Yes.
They're pretty good.
Good.
And high in the healthy oil that we're looking for.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Cooking practices. When we are cooking with oils, regardless of what oil we're talking about, or even if we're talking about butter or something like that, you want to be aware of how hot it is getting. Because when that oil begins to smoke, that's a sign that it's losing its benefits, it's losing its goodness, and it is now becoming something that is more toxic, potentially carcinogenic, and not very helpful for us. So if you're cooking and you can keep those temperatures a little bit lower, you will be better off. Obviously that isn't always possible depending on what you want to make. Like if you are making a steak, not you, but if you are making a steak, you do want that pan nice and hot so you can get that good sear, right? So there's that to think about. But you could use your oven, you could use an air fryer, and you could keep the temperatures lower. Using an air fryer, you can even use less oil. So that's one of the benefits. So this is an easy practice that you can take away with you. Cooking at lower temperatures, preventing that oil from smoking, that makes a very big difference. Is that something you feel like you could do?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, we are getting towards the end. We're almost there. I've got a few more slides left. Are we comfortable at the moment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I haven't lost anyone.
We're all awake.
Fibre.
Yeah.
Fibre is important. Eating fibre helps reduce blood sugar spikes, improves digestion, and improves gut health. It also helps reduce your risk of things like hemorrhoids, diverticulitis, bowel cancer, stuff like that. Like very important things that we want to avoid, right? So a couple things you want to think about. Variety and quantity. Variety and quantity. If we can slowly increase the quantity and variety, the ecosystem within your gut will improve. And what that means is that essentially inside of your gut, we have a load of bacteria. That bacteria feeds off of organic material that the fruit and vegetables are made out of. And the more variety you've got, the more of them that you can feed. That's essentially how I think about it. So what we want to do is we do want to eat a bunch of different types. It says here, eat a rainbow. And that's not referring to Skittles. This is a variety of colorful fruits and vegetables that will have different benefits as well. So the different colors of the different fruits and veg have different benefits because that indicates that they have a different makeup of vitamins and minerals. Now, we want to include a variety, but it doesn't just have to be your conventional fruits and vegetables in order to increase your fiber intake. So it could be the whole grain pasta, the whole grain bread, the whole grain rice, the oats, like we looked at earlier. So we have those before in the low GI column. Suddenly we're also increasing our fiber intake. That's a pretty good deal. Things like bulgur wheat, barley, popcorn. Popcorn's an interesting one. A lot of people don't realize, but if you swapped out crisps for popcorn, maybe not the salted caramel and drizzled and whatnot. Yeah, or maybe a little bit of sugar or something like that. But it could be a better alternative, right? Quinoa. We've then got your conventional, apples, oranges, pears, cherries, berries, beans, lentils, peas. Again, another benefit of these foods that we looked at earlier. Bananas, grapes, melons, pineapples. I've included some of the higher GI foods too, because I'm not trying to demonize them. They still have benefits. We just want to think about how much I'm having. Sweet potato, new potato, potato skins, peppers, mushrooms, courgettes, avocados, and then nuts and seeds down here. So one thing you could think about is having an aim. And for a lot of people, having 30 different types of fruit and veg or fiber per week can really help to improve your gut and your digestion. For some, that's easier than others, depending on how good your digestion is. But that's a good kind of aim to work towards. And another thing that you can add to this list is seasoning. So cumin, coriander, garlic, paprika, all of these different seasonings add to the variety that you are feeding to your gut. So that's another thing that you could think about. So again, if we're talking about what we did before, an extra serving of peas would do me good for my blood sugar, but also for my gut health as well. Are we happy with that?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, salt. Overall, salt consumption across the world is double what it should be. I want you to consider how much salt you use. Some of you, I imagine, don't cook with salt at all.
No.
Am I right?
Yeah.
What I would encourage you to go and do, however, is look at the labels and see how much salt is in the things that we are using on a daily basis, because you might find that there's more than you imagine. Particularly in things like sauces, Seasonings is a really big one. If you use stock cubes, if you use all-purpose or chicken seasoning or something like that, you will find a lot more salt than you might imagine. Of course, we're not pouring the whole, I don't think, the whole thing in, but you know, it adds up, is what I'm trying to say. And then of course the salt that we do add ourselves. So it's just something to be cautious about. Hydration, drinking more water. If you can if you can do anything after leaving here today, drinking more water is an easy fix for some, right? Now, the reason I say that is because A, your body needs the water. Your body needs the water. One of the ways that your body gets rid of excess sugar, does anybody know what it is? Yeah. So when your blood sugar is higher, you go to the toilet, you flush out all of that excess sugar. If you are then dehydrated, your body doesn't have a mechanism for being able to get rid of that excess sugar. So drinking more water throughout the day can help you to do that. Not only that, but you need it to help transportation of nutrients and get rid of waste products. Most of the time, if you are feeling faint or you've got a headache or something like that, best port of call, go and drink more water. A lot of the time, we just don't even think about it. Some people drink water like religiously and do it naturally. Other people, you might need to be reminded, in which case you might need to set an alarm on your phone every hour, drink. You might want to start carrying a bottle around with you so that you have a reminder on hand. And also, I always find that people who have those bottles, you know, with the time of day stamped on it, you ever seen those?
Yeah.
Those are really helpful because it helps you to see how much I should be drinking throughout the day. So I really recommend those. We want to drink between 1.5 and 2 liters per day. For reference, this is a liter. 1.5 to 2 of these a day is fairly doable. I personally drink a lot of water. I drink probably about 5 of those a day. But you don't need to drink as much as that. If you just gradually increase it a little bit, little sips, that makes a world of difference.
I think that's about one of the most important things because, like, as a reflexologist, that's the number one thing we say is please drink more water.
Yeah.
If you don't do anything else, if you don't listen to anything else, the advice is more water.
It's probably the easiest to implement. We've already looked at several things you could go away and do. This is probably the easiest you can implement, and it will yield you very positive results. Doesn't have to be plain water though. Teas and coffees count, soups count. You could add something to the water, could be squash, some people like, could be fruit that you infuse in it, cucumber, lemon, whatever it may be. Fruit also contains water as well. So I'm not saying get all of your fruit from watermelon, but all of your water from watermelon, but you get the idea. So at the end of every session, what I like to do is give you a structure that you can use to make a plan for moving forward, right? So the reason why I like to structure it like this is because often when people leave my sessions or when people go on like a health kick, they always give themselves a big aim to work towards, right? So in this case, my aim is to reduce my risk of type 2 diabetes and have more energy. But if I said to you right now, go forth and reduce your risk of type 2 diabetes and have more energy, how many of you might feel daunted by that task? Like that's a big ask, right? So what we got to do is we got to break it down into a series of goals and actions. So a broad goal which would help me work towards this is simply eat better. Now I've narrowed it down to at least a segment, because actually I could do that in a bunch of different ways. I could do that by working on my sleep, I could do that by working on my exercise, I could do that by working on my nutrition. So eat better is the broad direction. To specify, I'm going to try to eat more fiber, more protein, and healthy fat. Nice, now I've got a specific direction. On a weekly basis, I'm going to stock the cupboards with healthier snacks like nuts, dates, and oatcakes. And on a daily basis, I'm going to buy a whole grain breakfast cereal and include chia seeds and blueberries. So on a daily basis, I'm going to have my healthy breakfast. My snacks are now healthier as well. And if I just follow these two things, that's it. If I just follow that for the next few months, I will get healthier in the process. And then what I can do is I can look to start adding to the list. So the more sessions you come to, or you read the stuff that I put out, you watch my other videos, whatever you want to do, you'll find that there are a few extra things that you can just add to the roster. This is just how you could potentially get started. And if you focus on your daily and your weekly actions, hopefully the long-term change will follow. But you don't have to focus on that because you're focusing on this. Who reckons these are quite doable? Yeah? How many of you would feel more comfortable working towards this than this? That's the benefit of these. So, I hope, and you don't have to follow this one. You could do your own version of this. This is just the structure that I like to use. So I hope that this is useful to you. Have you enjoyed this? Yeah? Lovely. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you so much. Thank you. We did that in very good time. I was expecting to take longer to do that. That was good.
Could we take a photo of that again? Sorry.
Yes.